So you're talking about, while I'm finishing this setup here, we were talking about the market crash, and you were bringing up that it looks like part of it had to do, if not a significant amount of it, had to do with the yen trading. So what does this article say?
Yeah, so it has something to do with, so there's this concept of the carry trade, okay? And so again, not a financial expert at all. This isn't financial advice. This is just what I've read and kind of what videos were out, what videos popped up on my For You page. Um, so the carry trade, it's a financial strategy where investors borrow money at a low interest rate in one currency, and often it's the Japanese yen, because I didn't realize this. The cost to borrow is like 0.3%. Crazy. Then they invest in assets with higher yield in another currency. And Japan has had this long-standing policy of maintaining ultra low interest rates, which makes this a popular currency for this strategy. Now, what happened was, so when many investors engage in the carry trade, they sell yen and buy foreign currencies, which can lead to depreciation of the yen. This devaluation makes Japanese exports cheaper and can potentially stimulate the Japanese economy. However, it can also lead to volatility in the currency markets. So the carry trade can have significant implications for the global stock markets. The influx of capital into higher yielding assets can drive up stock prices in those markets. And conversely, when there's a shift in interest rates or economic policy, such as the Bank of Japan hinting at rate hikes, or an increase in the in currency, in forex, rapid movements of the stock market would happen as the stock market, as investors sell off their foreign assets and buy back the yen. And so Wall Street closely monitors the carry trade due to its potential to create both opportunities and risks. And so what happened, this is exactly what happened, is the cost to buy and sell, the cost to buy yen went up, which means that the cost, I think it went up and it was like 8%. But if you're thinking about these traders who are trading millions and millions of dollars, that 8% has a huge implication. And so that's why there was this stock market crash.
Okay.
It's cool though. It's
I
cool
haven't
that,
I haven't read about it. I was planning on talking about it, but it seemed to have recovered since then, because I figured we'd have more of an impact on tech companies. I've seen a couple of tech companies announcing layoffs as a result, and I haven't dug deep into, was this just a time to do it, or because they lost a certain amount of value over a period of time?
Yeah, but it's the reason why I just think it's interesting is because of the strategy. It didn't happen because of something something really, I would say, newsworthy. It happened because of a strategy that just ended up being less of a strategy for a little bit, and it just course corrected kind of. But yeah.
Well, this is great. Let's get into it. We have a lot to talk about. Thanks for joining us today, John. This first one is really interesting. The Logitech mouse rental scam.
Yeah.
Did you read anything about this?
I did. This is ridiculous. Like, seriously. Even if you're paying $1 a month, you can get a mouse for what, $5 on maybe $10 on Amazon. What is the point? What kind of new features are they going to give you that it's going to be worthwhile for you to want to pay for a monthly subscription for a friggin' mouse?
Well, I guess they haven't decided 100% to go forward with this. This is the new CEO was proposing this, and there's been a bunch of backlash. They're adding an AI button, so that you can press a button and open, I guess, the AI prompt of your choice. But I mean, if you know anything about Logitech, mice, you can program that anyway. I'm looking at, I have you over in the corner, so I keep looking over
Okay.
there when I shouldn't. That's why I'm moving you around now so I can have you in the right spot. Yeah, so this is ridiculous. They're calling it the Forever Mouse. They're proposing this. I'm not sure if it's gonna go anywhere. Our friend Stefan suggesting here that
Stefan.
we're Stefan, that we're
Yeah.
kidding them. This is Orson Welles type of stuff. Yeah, they want a Logitech subscription. Offers users a chance to receive regular updates and new models of the mice. However, the seemingly innovative service is nothing more than an attempt to lock customers into a continuous payment cycle like everyone else has done, right?
Yeah.
But are really mice worth it? Like I've
No.
found, actually, I've got the high-end MX3 Logitech and I've had nothing but problems with it.
Yeah.
And I bought a $20 mouse on Amazon and it's great. And that's kind of what I've been using. Why would I go to a rental? Now they say frequent shipments, you'll regularly receive a new mouse. Sounds nice, but how often do you really need a new mouse? You'll get software updates. While regular updates can be beneficial, they're often available for free with a standard purchase. So you're not going to update drivers or software for the non-rental subscription. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Like I maybe for gamers, who knows? I don't know, but like yeah. So first off, Logitech stuff is crap now. I find like you should see the reviews online. Like it's horrible. The quality of their product is horrendous. And yet they're expecting people to pay a monthly fee. Maybe this is like, okay, you pay us a monthly fee, and the second that this is like a warranty kind of thing, right? Second your mouse breaks, we'll send you a new one. But like, just get one that actually works, and you don't have to pay a monthly fee. And yeah, like you said, how often are people going to upgrade their mice? Or how often do people change their mice? Like the one I've had for many years. It's not a no name brand, but it's not Logitech, and it works phenomenal.
But I guess they want you to change your mouse, right? A
Yeah,
decent mouse can be bought, like I said, for about $20, but even the high end models are 50 to $100, maybe a little bit more. Compare this to subscription that could easily exceed those costs within a year, depending what they want to charge, right? Unnecessary upgrades, paying for features you don't need.
yeah,
Why would we do this? And it's, at some point they're going to say, well, you're using the mouse too much, or they're going to replace it every 1,000 clicks, or for gamers, at some point they're going to say, well, you've used up your 5,000 clicks for the month. You can't click anymore. Like,
yeah,
you start going down this hole of, really? So I'm renting this mouse. I don't own it. So now am I going to have some sort of lease return? So when I send back the mouse, they're going to put it through its paces. And if I didn't take care of it, I'm going to get less, you know what I mean? From like when you return a car.
yeah. Like
So
seriously, what kind of idiot comes up with something like this? Who's running a company? Like this is something that should have been run through advisors, through a bunch of different people to be like, no, this is a stupid idea. Like this is dumb. Like this goes beyond like this is like BMW making you pay for heated seats, a
yeah.
monthly subscription for heated seats. That's this. It's on along the same lines, and BMW walked that back.
Yeah, and we'll see if Logitech's going to walk this back, because the customer feedback paints a clear picture that the subscription's not worth it. They got a lot of negative reviews, common criticisms of high cost for minimum investment, poor value. Users generally feel that they're being taken advantage of.
Yeah,
And this is an article on LinkedIn, but um, there's a couple of more here from Ars Technica. Logitech has an idea for the Forever Mouse that requires a subscription. That's talking about the price of the Forever Mouse. Still at tag around $200 would limit the audience to professionals or enthusiasms, because the Forever Mouse could cost $200. I don't know, sure if that's a permanent thing. If I just paid $200 once and I get it, maybe, but it's not what it's seeming to be.
no,
And they say the average price here is for a keyboard or a mouse is $26, and I mentioned the $20 one. They mentioned here they've added a Chat GPT launcher to its peripherals. Like, really?
yeah, Oh, you've used up your AI for the month. You can't. You used up. You hit the button too many times. That's so dumb. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
don't see
it's
this.
this is crazy, and I don't see this going anywhere. I just wanted to make people aware of it that, yeah, they're talking about this. They haven't actually launched it yet, but um, the CEO that was appointed in October said members of a Logitech Innovation Center showed their Forever Mouse and compared it to a nice but not super expensive watch. So that's what they're trying to do here,
Yeah, except when you buy a watch, and I am a watch guy. When you buy a watch, you're investing in a watch. That watch retains its value, even goes up in value. I'm sorry, but that is the stupidest analogy I've ever heard from anyone. I'm sorry, this really grinds my gears. But like, yeah, when you buy a watch, a good watch like Rolex, Breitling, Panerai, that watch you could wear it for multiple years and sell it for pretty much the same price that you paid for it. Can you do the same thing with the mouse? No. You can kind of do that with Apple products. Like Apple products don't depreciate that much, but Logitech is crap. So, but they're the only real peripheral that I know of. Like I can't think of another peripheral brand. Can you
Well, there's a bunch out there,
that
but
come to mind? Like as big as Logitech?
not that have the brand awareness. But if you actually go out and Google some of these stuff, or you go look for them, so okay, Newer makes these, and um, uh, Razer makes these,
Oh,
and
Razer, yeah,
there's a
yeah,
bunch out there. It's just as soon as you're like, oh yeah, I know these 5 or 6 brands. There's not many, and Logitech has the definitely brand space. Um, Henneke Faber recently was the person who's doing the Logitech CEO. Uh, they want to sell a mouse to customers that they can use forever. And the executive said such a mouse isn't necessarily far away and will rely on software updates like delivered through a subscription model. So they're just going to continually update your software. Um, the CEO said that members, okay, we talked about that, but up here, they're not there yet. I'm not sure. We'll obviously have to fix and figure out the business model. Um, our stuff has to change, but does the hardware have to change? We're not at the Forever Mouse today, but I'm intrigued by the thought. So they're really trying to get there to a subscription model that works for Logitech. So I guess we're gonna have to see.
yeah. That was just not thought through. But again, I guess what do they say? Any news, good or bad, is I can't remember the saying. Anyways,
Yeah, it's as long as they're talking about you, right? There's no such thing as bad news. Some people say, as long as at
yeah,
least there's some political politicians in the U.S. that might have that philosophy.
yeah,
All right, let's jump to this next one here.
uh,
Intel. We talked about this last week. We
yeah,
talked about, oh, looks like they'd figured it out. Looks like they've launched this patch. Looks like they've, done these things.
yeah.
But I don't believe any of that's true. Since then, a lot of stuff has come out saying, well, they've known about this since 2021. And they've, lied to the consumers. They've lied to their stakeholders. It was only a small percentage of um, the Intel chips, like 20-30%.
Yeah.
Now it turns out to be all all the whole lineup is pretty much affected by these things.
Oh, so it's a much bigger problem than they let on. Not surprising.
Yes, and the fixes they've done aren't fixes. They haven't worked. So um now they've announced
No,
that
but the
go ahead.
the fix that we talked about the voltage, is that not the fix, or is it not, or is it something new now?
So Intel's faced issues with their CPU, particularly affecting models in the 14900 and 13900. Initially, Intel silently addressed problems but didn't communicate it with users. When pressed by media, Intel updated statements, but often without addressing concerns directly. There were changes in scope of affected CPUs, expanding from specific models to a broader range, impacting many users. Community moderators on Intel's subreddit were accused of deleting critical comments relating to these issues. Intel also allegedly blocked Twitter accounts reporting on its failures, which was later reversed. The company acknowledged issues with oxidation in some CPUs, which it had known about since 2023, contrasting when consumers were informed. Intel made significant layoffs and cost-cutting measures, including stopping dividends and reducing employee benefits because, their stock price has plummeted. I don't know if you've seen that.
Wow, no.
Intel shares plummet to a 50-year low amid the massive layoffs and dividend cuts, and this is all due to the problems with its chips. So,
it's trading just under $19 per share US.
Yeah, this article says it's at 1986 US. So, this was taken at a point in time.
Yeah,
so
it's just dropped from there. Yeah.
And so their Lunar Lake chipset looks like it's all affected by this as well. So Intel is sought to keep up with its rivals. Its new Lunar Lake processor is supposed to be 4 times faster at running AI workloads on laptops, but no one's trusting them right now. They're can I get past this? There's a pop-up ad here. Have an account, log in. Let me just see if I can I might have zoomed in. Oh yeah, maybe I'm zoomed in too much here. But Intel shareholders are suing them.
Yeah.
As a result of this. So
is it and I couldn't find based on this article, I couldn't find that is the fix that we talked about last week with the assembly level code, was that the actual solution, or did they lie about that? You might not know, but I couldn't find the answer.
Yeah, I think they lied about how many processors it affected.
Okay.
I think it doesn't overall fix this particular issue. The saga has been since late 2022. Reports of unexplained crashes. By 2023, the problems that escalated affected not just high-end processors, but mainstream models as well. There's a bunch of links to different stuff in this article that goes to the core discussions on each of these issues. The primary cause of the Intel's instability has been identified as elevated operating voltages. We talked a little bit that from a microcode bug. Further complicating matters, the instability has also been linked to aggressive BIOS settings. So it's not just that thing that fixes it. These settings aimed at maximized performance have inadvertently exacerbated the instability issues, and Intel has recommended users to revert to default settings to mitigate the problem. So if you're overclocking or have these high performance motherboards, and that's where they started saying, hey, it's you overclockers, you're running it too fast. Those motherboards don't meet our standards. But now they're saying, we're putting some microcode to help, but we really want, don't overclock them. They're still saying these things as part of it. So
it makes sense that it would affect more processors given the actual underlying root cause, which is the machine code, assembly code, because it would make sense that it would be a lot bigger of a problem, because there's no way that the assembly code would be unique for each processor or things like that. Like, there would be a lot of similarities.
Yeah, and so we were talking about their next chipset a little bit. So the Raptor Lake is what is affected right now. So their new next gen may or may not have these problems, but the assumption is it will, because unless they fix all these issues, because you're trying to get to, if it's microcode, they can fix that. But, they said it was Intel's response to the CPU instability has been multifaceted and slow. In mid 2023, they said, "Oh, here's a microcode patch aimed at the addressing the root cause of the voltage issue." They released that in 2023, and then again, they've released something else. This patch, however, has required extensive validation with full implementation expected by mid 2024. So they released this microcode in 2023, but it doesn't get to us till recently, as we were talking about, I think last week.
Yeah.
So users are unsatisfied. These things keep crashing. You can't run them at the speeds you want to run them at. Plus the oxidation issues, AC DC load line matching. They're suggesting Intel put everything back to default settings and disabling aggressive overclocking features. So users are really unhappy. The shareholders and partners are suing them amongst a bunch of things. You lied to us. You hid this from the investors, from the consumers, from. So I wouldn't be surprised if the FTC gets involved in this as well. But looking ahead, Intel is working on several fronts to restore stability and confidence, but I'm not sure, with so many other options right now, with Microsoft even moving to ARM-based processors, in Apple moving off them several years ago. Intel they can't afford this right now.
No. And on a side note, the biggest thing with ARM processors for those that are looking to upgrade is just be cognizant of, especially for those that are looking for those new Windows-based ARM processors, is make sure your apps are compatible. Apple had that problem when they first switched to ARM, but that's the biggest challenge when switching to ARM is the incompatibility of apps and having to emulate them and things like that. So, but sorry, back to Intel. Yeah, I know Intel is working on a new AI chip as well, but yeah, who knows how many chips this actually affects now. It's crazy.
So let's jump on to this next one.
Yeah, Google, an illegal monopoly.
Yeah, so that was decided yesterday, the day before. U.S. judge just announced that they've used aggressive monopoly, aggressive tactics to gain and maintain their monopoly, and that it's illegal. And now we got to take a look at what that means.
Yeah.
So have you read any about this? Have you thought about this at all?
Well, can I can't say I'm surprised. Sorry. I can't say I'm surprised that was the ruling. I'm surprised that they ruled on that, given Google's tentacles, and their their actual monopoly. So I'm happy that the DOJ has ruled on that. I'm not surprised that that's what they found, but you know what I mean? Like, given their political connections and their political clout and all of everything, I'm surprised that this actually went through, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We think that huge tech corporations might, are immune to some of this stuff because of their lobbying and the money they invest in political parties and whatnot. But here, Google's getting in trouble. So Google lost its landmark antitrust case against the U.S. Department of Justice this week after a federal judge ruled the tech giant had illegally built an illegal monopoly over online search and the advertising industry.
Yeah. 90% of the internet search market is what they own. That's crazy.
So Google could be forced to change search. One of the things that was part of this monopoly is Google pays Apple, as an example, $20+ billion for to be the default search engine on the iPhone.
Yeah.
Great. So who's that going to impact more? Google or Apple, when they can't, as soon as this contract's up, Google's can't do that anymore.
Yeah. The conspiracy theorist in me is thinking maybe Google allowed this because of all of the AI stuff coming up and search GPT, and they're like, okay, you know what? Now this is okay because we're already losing market share anyway. So what the hell?
I guess, but like you have to really understand the impact. For example, here in the article it says Mozilla, whose Firefox browser defaults to Google's for search, receives 86% of its revenue, roughly 510 million of 593 million from Google's search
Wow.
payment. So what happens when that disappears? Is
Yeah.
that more
Well,
competition or
Mozilla is
less
not for profit,
competition?
aren't they? Mozilla is not for profit, right?
I think they
Maybe.
were. I don't know if they still are.
Okay.
So Mozilla is closely reviewing the court's decision, considering its potential impact on Mozilla and how we can positively influence next steps. So, what does that mean? Are they
But,
going to die because they, lost almost all of they're going to lose all their money?
but what's the alternative? Bing? Bing is like, I'm sorry, but Bing does not give you good search results.
Yeah. And I think the alternative is new tools like Search GTP that we
Yeah.
talked about, or we talked about that last week. We're going to talk about something else with GTP this week. Um, that's the coming thing, but I guess this is to promote competition so that there's not the increased barrier that maybe new search engines, new tools, new stuff can actually get a foothold, because they argue that these are anti-trust type of actions when you say, well, we're going to pay to have all the Apple users on our system because our system gets better with every user. Every time you search something, we get more data, more information, what you clicked on, what you don't, what was wrong, what was right. And that helps us tweak our search engines, which means that it's almost impossible for anyone else to get to become competition because they're locked in 90% of the planet.
Hmm. Exactly.
So what do you do?
Exactly. What yeah, it can't things can't change overnight, obviously. But who knows? I still don't have access to Search GPT, so we'll have to see if that is a better alternative.
Yeah, the judge also concluded that Google's control over search advertising was illegal, although he dismissed claims that Google monopolized all search advertising, noting that companies like Amazon compete by selling ads on their own search results. The nuanced rulings highlighted the complexity of the antitrust issues in the digital age that sets the stage for significant changes in how Google operates. So, not only because they were doing all this and they had a lock on search, they could charge more for advertising on their platform. And so this
Absolutely.
and that became a huge issue. And we talk about the advertising as a result. We'll probably talk about this next week. I know that X and a few other companies are suing because of ad monopolies that were trying to block certain companies from getting any advertising and stuff that was part of this Google situation. So it'll be interesting to follow up. So yeah, what does this mean? When is Apple going to be able to use Google anymore? Do they have to develop their own search engine? Other individuals doing? Are they going to say, all right, well, if Google can't pay us, will Bing pay us? And then you say, well, maybe Bing can't pay us anymore, and this whole
Yeah,
business model goes to heck because no one's going to pay for this anymore because it's illegal action. It's a
yeah,
predatory behavior from a business point of view.
it is. For sure it is. Yeah.
But
Well, OpenAI starts. Maybe there's another way to incentivize people, right? Who knows? Um,
yeah, so we
like
don't know
maybe,
what this is going to mean overall, but we know it's going to have an immediate impact on the tech industry. Like I said, lots of people were receiving lots of money from companies like Google to do stuff like this. But
yeah,
they're not the only one that is doing this predatory type behavior. So big companies like Microsoft and Apple and whatnot are going to have to take a step back and say, okay, what practices are we doing that might compare to this, because they're going to come after us too.
exactly. Yeah,
So we've got an article on torontostarts.com that this will be attached to this uh, podcast. Go take a look at that or do your own Google searches. It'll be interesting to see where this is going and what it means to many of the tech companies that we don't really think about. We say, oh, great, this will be great for Firefox. Well, it won't be, because they're going to lose 90% of their income.
yeah.
And so that this might instantly kill them as a company.
Yeah,
So,
let's hope.
well, I mean, it might instantly kill Mozilla because they
Oh,
will no
yeah, no,
longer
that's
be able
not
to
good.
survive. That's what I'm talking about. Is
Yeah,
is this really going to promote competition in search when all of a sudden all the other browsers die? Because maybe same thing with Brave and many of these other things. Maybe they're integrating Google search and getting a chunk of revenue from that that's paying a big chunk of where their money comes from.
maybe. Yeah,
And all of a sudden that'll dry up. Those companies will disappear overnight.
yeah. Who knows? Let's hope
So
not. But
interesting stuff. So it's the advertising and the search, and we'll keep on top of this. And talking about, these types of things, does the FTC need to do a rethink how they regulate tech?
yeah, absolutely. FTC, they're for those that don't know, they're the regulating body for the tech industry, and a bunch of other things. They're the Federal Trade Commission. But there's a growing consensus that the current approach may be outdated. And yeah, absolutely. We've talked about this in the past. We've talked about the lack of FTC doing things and doing the wrong things. So yeah, they need to adopt a more flexible, forward-thinking approach that can better accommodate unique challenges because of today's tech landscape and how it's changing in so much. So they need to understand the implications of new technologies and fostering innovation and protecting consumer interests without stifling growth. But at the same time, they need to step in when they have to.
Absolutely. And so the question becomes, as we've seen time after time, EULAs being, anti-competitive and predatory to consumers. We've
Exactly.
seen, that we've seen this type of stuff. Like we talked last week about photo buckets stealing biometrics. Like if I upload a picture of you and a couple other people, they're taking, without your consent, your retina scans, your fingerprints, anything they can do about you. Because I tagged you in the photo, they know who it is, and now they have this huge database of biometric information that they're selling to people. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but that's just not okay.
No, it's not. And yeah, so they need to adopt a more proactive stance. They should anticipate technological trends and potential regulatory challenges rather than merely reacting to issues as they arise. That's the biggest thing I think they need to do.
Yeah, and the FTC has long been tasked with overseeing competition and consumer protection in various industries, including technology. Current regulations focus on preventing unfair business practices and maintaining competitive markets. However, critics argue that these policies have fallen short in addressing rapid advancements and increasing dominance of major tech companies. High profile
For sure.
cases such as Google's antitrust issue that we just talked about, Facebook's data privacy violations highlight the need for stringent and adaptable regulatory frameworks. This is where the FTC's tech policy overhaul comes into play, aiming to rectify these shortcomings by introducing more targeted and effective measures. So I take a step back and say, okay, but can they do this?
Well,
Because
the
be,
European Union has.
well, I say this because of the Chevron deference has been overturned, the Chevron doctrine. So,
Yeah.
can the FTC actually make these regulations and then enforce them, or do this? They have to put them towards Congress. Congress says yes, and then they can go ahead and do it. So, I think this is going to be a longer process than historically has happened because of some of the Supreme Court decisions over the last couple of months.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. But honestly, I think the U.S. needs to take a page out of the EU. The EU is doing some really forward-thinking things. They've implemented a lot of great policies. The GDPR was phenomenal when it came out. It was well thought out. It protected people's data, and they're actually enforcing it, which is awesome. Um, but I don't know if the U.S. is in the same position to be able to do that, to be able to get put those things in place, right?
Well, I think they just have to streamline the process of Congress making these laws again versus outsourcing them to other, that just has to be done so that they can do these things and enforce them. But I agree that things need to be done. The European model doesn't look bad on some of these things. And we're going to be talking about the EU AI Act in a few minutes. The FTC tech policy overhaul is expected to have profound implications for major technology companies like Google, Facebook, and Apple. These companies will face stricter scrutiny and more rigorous enforcement of antitrust laws, potentially limiting their ability to engage anti-competitive practices.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, they're talking about mergers and acquisitions and consolidating market power. And, I want to see more consumer protections. It's great,
Yeah.
talk about monopolies, but we don't necessarily want those. But when the monopolies do things like what Disney Plus is doing with their EULA, what Adobe was doing, what PhotoBucket is doing, like these things need to be stopped. They can't just say, yeah, we have the rights to everything you ever done anywhere, and that's ours now because you bought our software or you looked at it once. That's just ridiculous.
And if you try to cancel on us, we'll sue you.
Yeah. And that's why I want to see more consumer protections in that area. And it looks like they're moving in that way too. They want more control over data, ensuring that they have access to fair competitive markets, improve repair options for consumer devices, stronger data privacy measures, and greater transparency in business practices are just a few of the benefits that consumers can expect. And let's hope they adopt some good regulation here. The tech companies do a lot of lobbying, and I wonder how long these changes are going to take.
Well, they're going to take forever. Well, that being said, with the ruling of Google being a monopoly, who knows? Maybe it's sooner than we think.
Maybe it's sooner than you think. Now that they've ruled this, we'll have to, like, some of it's going to happen obviously right away because some of these practices are going to have to change because Google's going to want to change immediately. By the time they come around and say, here's what we want you to do, they want to be able to say, oh, well, we've done all this stuff already, so please reduce whatever we owe you and don't make it so bad on us, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to talk. There's a lot to watch here, and how this will affect big companies. Will it actually promote fairer competition or not? As a result of, like I said, overnight, based on our last one with the Google unfair practices, overnight we're probably going to lose a bunch of companies that people love because they're getting 90% of the revenue from those Google searches.
Yeah.
All right. Anything more on this one?
No.
All right. First of all, I want to ask a question. Well, let me just talk about this. DR.GPT, using ChatGPT to diagnose your symptoms, your health symptoms, is a bad idea.
Just like using WebMD. This is the new WebMD.
Yeah. ChatGPT basically sucks at diagnosing patients. So here's a question for you. How many people would be, average North Americans would be going to ChatGPT to say, I feel like this, and this, what's wrong with me?
Well, less than before this article, that's for damn sure, and less than before this podcast. This is going to be scary. So the people that don't understand is that these LLMs, which is what ChatGPT is, it's a large language model, right? They're trained on general information, just like WebMD. This is the same thing as WebMD. In order for something like in order for an LLM or ChatGPT to be a diagnostic tool, it essentially needs to go to medical school, and it needs to be a specialist in that particular area. And even then, it needs a lot more training. It needs a lot more data, a lot more, like, just so much more work being put into it in order for it to even get close to being able to diagnose accurately. So yeah, people are still going to go. People are still going to ask the questions. And again, it's when it comes down to it, and you and I have talked about this in the past, it all comes down to the prompt that you give it. So I bet though, if you give it a good enough prompt, that you could probably get a more accurate diagnosis. But people do not know how to do prompts. People don't know how to properly write prompts. And I'm not saying go out and figure out how to write the right prompt. No, because these LLMs are not made for diagnosing medical conditions. They're not made for a lot of things that people are using it for. And the biggest thing, though, guys, is that here's the thing. This is, and I keep repeating this. When you use any LLM, ChatGPT or Claude, which is my favorite, or Llama, you have to know what kind of output you're expecting in order to know whether or not you're using it right. And that's the biggest problem is people are leveraging these AIs and they're just taking what the AI is saying at face value. And that's horrible.
You know, when do AI made up facts just become facts on the internet? I've been talking about this for months.
Yeah, well, and we talked about this last week, I think, where as AIs get trained on new data, it's going to get trained on its own data eventually, right? Because on its own data outputs, and then it's going to be trained on bad outputted data. That's the scary part. How are we going to prevent that?
We're not. A recent experiment found that the popular artificial intelligence chatbot makes wrong medical calls more often than not. ChatGPT in its current form is not accurate as a diagnostic tool. The study published today in the journal PLOS ONE wrote that ChatGPT does not necessarily give factual correctness despite the vast amount of information it was trained on.
Yeah. I wonder, and this is ChatGPT, and this is me being biased again, but Anthropic's Claude, I wonder if they tested it against that to see if it was more accurate. Because I find, honestly, Claude gives you more accurate. I'm not saying go out and use Claude over ChatGPT for medical diagnosis. I'm just saying I wonder which one is more accurate than the other, if there is one, or are they all the same when it comes to medical diagnosis?
Yeah, it's curious to see, like, in February 2023, ChatGPT was able to barely pass the United States medical licensing exam with no extra special inputs from human trainers. Despite the program not coming close to acing the test, the researchers behind the experiment hailed the result as a notable milestone for AI.
Yeah, but I think it aced the LSAT, the lawyer one.
It could have, but the question is, you know, like any of those things, do you really want to trust it? They're Google the internet for ChatGPT making up legal cases. So we know lawyers and whatever have used this to make their arguments, and it just makes up these precedents that don't exist.
Yeah, that's crazy. And that's what I mean by you need to know what the output you're expecting is, whether or not it's accurate.
While ChatGPT was trained on hundreds of terabytes of data across the internet, it only got the answers right 49% of the time. It scored a bit better on relevancy of its explanation, offering complete relevant explanations 52% of the time. The researchers observed that while AI was fairly good at eliminating wrong answers, that's not the same as making the right call in a clinical setting. Precision and sensitivity are crucial for a diagnostic tool because misdiagnosis can lead to significant consequences for patients, such as lack of necessary treatments or further diagnostic testing, resulting in worse health outcomes. I guess the same thing could be applied to businesses. If you're only giving it so much input, or it could easily get half the stuff wrong, how would you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the scary part, though.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So what do you do about this, right? You know, do you put guardrails on it saying, hey, you know, we can't give you medical advice, and so you don't get answers?
There's
like,
always ways around it.
You should eat 3 small stones a day for minerals, like the Google one was telling you.
Yeah, well, maybe they'll give you the same advice as Trump gives you, is to pump bleach directly into your veins. The one, but there's always ways around it, right? And this is not any kind of advice, but what I found is what I've heard. I haven't tried it, but if you ask it in past tense, that gets around some of the regulation things that the kind of blocks in place.
Yeah, I also find there's a couple of ways if you want to do that. Yeah, you were saying if you're doing something like, hey, let's help me plan out a certain task that might be perceived as illegal. It'll say, no, can't do that. Like, let's just say
Yeah,
bank robbery. I don't want
yeah,
to get flagged by anything.
no,
But if you say, like you were saying, how would someone have performed a bank robbery in the 70s? It would come with a detailed plan on that. So
definitely, yeah,
um, that helps. But, also making it fiction, writing an article about something, you can get it to do more when you put everything in context. Like, I'm writing a
yeah,
short story about these robbers that get caught, blah, 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 blah. Let's design the theme. And then, obviously they'll write the plan and it'll help you go through those things. So you
yeah,
just gotta manipulate the way you want, but there's still things it won't do. Mostly copyright stuff. I find it because I get it to create a lot of images and album art for just blog posts and stuff. Just give
yeah,
it a feel. It's not great at those things, but it's nice and quick and gives you a feel for what's happening. Um, but if you want to do anything somewhat copyright, if you want it to do like a face of Elon Musk, it doesn't like to do that, but it could do a
interesting.
caricature. It could do, there's things it won't do just from copyright things.
Yeah,
So I'm finding some of that funky, but once you kind of get around it, um,
yeah,
but
yeah. It's funny because like I haven't really run into that where it says sorry, Hal, I can't do that, or whatever it is from Space Odyssey 2001. Like, I've never run into that because I guess I've never asked to do things that are questionable.
well, I guess, we talk about a company, we talk about Elon Musk, we talk about whatever, and I'm saying, hey, ChatGPT, create an image of Elon Musk doing this and that. And
Oh
it's
yeah,
like,
you
oh,
do. Yeah, you do a lot of
sorry, I
that.
can't do that. And I'm like, okay. Well,
Yeah,
I think I was saying like Elon Musk planting a flag on Mars with a big smile on his face when we are talking about a colonization of Mars. Like, okay, can't do that. Let's figure out. Okay, let's do a Mars rover with the Tesla symbol and a Mars colony with the SpaceX logo on it. That worked. Okay, we'll see. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So there's some things it doesn't want to do, and it's not so much, like you said, you don't necessarily come into those things. It's like, okay, I don't want to. I, as a creator, don't want to get in trouble. So hopefully, I'm glad they put those guardrails in there. But sometimes they don't tell you what you can't do. They just say, sorry, due to copyright concerns, I can't comply. I'm like, okay, well,
yeah,
you have to hunt around to say, oh, you don't want to do an image of this or you don't want to do that. But sometimes like it won't do the exact logos or it doesn't know those things. So you got to tell it, say, hey, go search the internet for the Google logo and come back when you have a good idea of what it looks like. And then you say, all right, do an image, blah, 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 of the Google logo on trial or this or that. And then it'll do some stuff.
okay,
It's
cool.
just,
Yeah, I've never used it for generating images or things like that. So that's cool though.
yeah. And funny, I've had some problems, like problems creating images in the past because my buddy does role playing and plays D&D and stuff. And it's great when you're creating images, but sometimes when you're saying, "Hey, has a sword in his hand with an aggressive stance," they're like, "Oh, can't do that." Well, I mean, it's a halfling and a dragon in a fantasy setting. It's not like we're promoting violence against anything. So you've got to kind of
You're promoting violence against
the
halflings.
or no, the halfling on dragon
Oh
violence.
yeah, yeah, halfling on dragon violence.
Anyway, so you have to kind of, I understand they're there, but when you're
Yeah,
doing stuff, it takes you out of the thing. So, oh, I don't understand. But eventually you figure it out. Back to this though, as you can say, we're talking about those things and it doesn't understand or runs into guardrails. This needs to be obviously kind of reined in a little bit. From a giving medical advice. Why are we trying to get ChatGPT to pass the exam and act like a doctor? Like, who's doing that, and why should we be doing that?
hmm Well, because of WebMD, people people think that maybe this is the new WebMD, and it's not.
Or maybe people are trying to
And
streamline
WebMD was horrible as it was. Like every time it'd be like, "Yeah, you have cancer."
Well, everyone's pre-cancer unless you're
Yeah.
post-cancer, right?
Yeah.
And we're all pre-death. So,
Yeah.
but are they trying to get to a point where saying, "Hey, our medical system across the board are screwed. How do we use ChatGPT or tools like this to manage our emergency room better, manage our intake better, manage so we pre-diagnose some of these things and put people in categories that quickly allow us to quickly and better deal with them?" Maybe, but I think, when you're talking about it makes the right decision 49% of the time, you start to question, should we be doing this?
Yeah. No, you shouldn't.
Fair enough.
Even 70%, you shouldn't.
But I want to question then, how often does the nurse who does it or the doctor who does that evaluation make the right decision? Is it
Yeah.
70%? Is it 80%? I'm just
Yeah.
curious because, we can't just say, oh, that's bad because it's only 70%. Well, we don't know what humans are. It's bad because it's 70% because at 71, it'll tell you to, go eat rocks or drink poison or something.
Yeah. Exactly.
Rather than, that's the problem. All right. You talking about EU a lot lately
Yeah.
and how much you want to move there.
Serious. Well, just because of how forward thinking, how tech friendly they are, yet uh, protection of consumers and their data and things like that. Like that, I think, and I'm sure I'll get tons of haters for this, but I feel like they're getting it the most right out of any of the nations as far as when it comes to um, managing tech, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you've been fairly a proponent of them, saying that
Yeah.
they're making better steps. You're not saying, oh, they're the greatest things to slice bread, which, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. You're saying
No. Yeah.
that they're leading by example,
Yeah.
and they're doing much farther along than some other countries that aren't.
Yeah. So in speaking of this, like they've been proactive in developing a comprehensive regulatory framework for artificial intelligence, obviously to ensure that the deployment's safe, it's ethical, and respects fundamental rights. And so the proposed regulations are obviously part of the EU's broader strategy to foster innovation, but also safeguarding public interest. So, like, they're looking to do what the US refuses to do, which is great, or at least has refused to do.
So, have you done a deep dive onto this? What are they saying?
No, I didn't do a deep dive into it, but so some high level components of the framework are it's more of a risk based approach. So it categorizes AI applications based on their risk levels, and the framework identifies four main categories, which is unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, minimal risk. So unacceptable risk are where AI applications pose a clear threat to safety, livelihoods, and rights, such as social scoring by governments, kind of as an example, which is banned. High risk is where AI systems use critical sectors like healthcare, transport, public administration. And these applications are subject to strict regulations, including transparency, accountability, and robust data governance. Then we get into limited risk, where AI systems with limited risk are required to adhere to specific transparency obligations, ensuring users are aware they are interacting with AI. And then we get to the minimal risk, where they're largely exempt from regulatory requirements, but encouraged to adopt voluntary codes of conduct. I love that. Obviously, there's going to be some tweaking that's needed, but to me, that sounds like a great first step.
It's definitely a first step. And I just, I guess it sounds like they've got the general categories covered.
Yeah.
I guess I would like a little more deep dive to say, okay, what is, let's give us some examples. What goes in this bucket and what goes in that bucket?
Well, they did. They kind of did. Like for the unacceptable or for the high risk, it's healthcare, transport, public administration, critical sectors, right? Um, Unacceptable risk is like yeah. Obviously, they're going to need examples, and this I
Yeah.
don't think this is this has been voted in. I think this is a work in progress. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, like I mean, their example of unacceptable risks that I've got is government-run social scoring systems that are used for behavioral manipulation. Well, yeah, of course,
Yeah.
but like, can
No,
we can we talk
but you
about
say yeah, of course. You say yeah, of course, but that makes sense to you then. So what they're putting in unacceptable risks, you're saying yes, makes sense. But you're saying as if yeah, it duh. But what this is showing is that they get it.
Well, in a way, they get it. It doesn't actually
Yeah,
show me they get it. I like to see 5 or 6 more things in that bucket. That I'd like to see things that are being proposed today, or things that are happening today, or whatever. That says, maybe this is moving along to that unacceptable risk, or this is in the high risk area, and this isn't. When we talk about content moderation, let's take a look.
yeah,
People talking about misinformation, whether it's political, whether it's medical, whether it's about individuals and travel or companies, bad reviews, good reviews. What's high risk and what is limited risk and what's unacceptable risk? Like, these are the things I'm
yeah,
asking, because I think
yeah,
that becomes if we're doing, I look all over the place and people are doing all sorts of AI automation to post content, post blogs, post this, post that. But if it happens that their post end up being AI post misinformation about medical stuff, does that become an unacceptable risk because it's a blog post about a medical thing? Like,
yeah.
this is what I like, some examples where we can get a better feel for. I mean, obviously, when I say, oh yeah, government run social scoring system and used for behavioral manipulation, well, obviously that seems like something that they're not doing now, but would want to do from a government perspective.
You would think
But
so, yeah,
from a consumer perspective, we don't want to be anything that has behavioral manipulation in it. Should be, we don't want that.
yeah,
So that's why I'm saying it's obvious. I think there's some here that aren't so obvious, but fit into some of these buckets, and that would give us a better idea. So
yeah.
I like what they're doing, such as minimal risk spam filters, AI enabled video games are largely exempt from regulatory requirements. Great. But when does that change? When the AI enabled video games have more violent content than you want, have more sexual content than you want, have more swearing than you want,
Well, then
it,
they'll adjust it though.
yeah, no, that's all I'm
Yeah,
saying is I like the framework. I like to see more examples, because then you can flush it out a little bit more. Because what happens is policymakers infamously make policy vague and back and forth and extraneously complicated. So if I could use that word, apparently I can't. So that they can go out and get jobs consulting and writing these things for companies later. This is not a conspiracy theory. Go look, and what happens. The people who write this stuff
yeah, but
end up.
Craig, you have to see that the EU has a good
I'm
a
not against
positive
this. I just
history.
want to see more. That's all I'm saying. I want to see more. This is a
Never
great step.
happy, never happy, no matter what.
I'm not saying that. I like where we're going. I just want to see more of, okay, what is in this bucket, what is in that bucket, so that we can actually start moving ahead. That's all. Great.
For sure.
These are great. So I want to go back. I want to be able to go back in my company, Microsoft, Apple, or whatever, say, okay, what things are we doing in this bucket, in this bucket, in this bucket, in this bucket? And I don't quite think most companies can do that right now with this framework. That's all I'm saying.
No, I agree.
It's a start, and I think
Yeah.
we're getting there. So I know you're, not happy with my take on this. I love it. I just think that I want to be able to get to a point where we can really enforce something like this, and companies know what it is and can implement policies that are aligned with this.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think it's great. There's penalties for non-compliance. There's a role of third-party auditors, compliance and conformity. So they have a bunch of stuff in there. You can go to the article on torontostarts.com or other links that will be in the show notes, where we're talking about this for the AI Act, and we go through impact and what other people are doing. Is there anything else you wanted to touch base on this?
Nope, that's it.
I know your week is packed, so you want to end it here? You want to talk about one neutron stripping?
No, I gotta go. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Craig. We can do a quick just ending. If you want to do
Fantastic,
the
John. What do you got going on?
next week. Futurists excited, yacht parties and poker tournaments and obviously the biggest after party of startup drinks to. So
Yeah, you're going to be exhausted because you're going on the boat cruise the night before. There's so much going on. The Futurist is such a great conference. They've got this huge AI lineup now, which I'm looking forward to talking to a bunch of AI startups and getting some interviews and whatnot. I've already lined up a couple other interviews. I've got to get on that. It's going to be great. So if companies are looking for funding, where should they go?
Yeah, come find me on LinkedIn, John Irwin. Pretty easy to find. Come reach out to me if you have any questions.
And for everything else, head over to torontostarts.com. We've got webinars, workshops, in-person events, online events. Most of them are free for now, but eventually we'll have memberships and some costs around some of those things. Go check them out. There's stuff, different stuff happening all the time. Send me a note. Let us know if you want me to talk about anything on this podcast or if you want us to cover anything on Toronto Starts Out with any of our events.
Absolutely.
All right, John, have a great day.
Thanks. You too, Craig.